Kingdom Hell, where met with the goddess of death herself. Hel agreed. Let Balder go back to the living, but put one condition: everything in the universe must be sincere. Mourn the beautiful, God thus proving his universal love only. In that case, Balder could come back delighted. Hermit is back in the Asgard with a kind, and sent messengers to the all 9 worlds so that every creature shed tears on the Balder. Humans, animals, plants are giants. Gods are all creatures living and unliving sincerely. Cried for Balder, proving his universal love and veneration. However, when the messengers of the gods reached distant caves, they met there a grim giant named Current who categorically refused to shed tears. Said, cold and indifferent, alive or dead, what difference? Balder, I don't need and I won't cry. This giant was none other than disguised Loki, who is way final and cruel, thwarted an attempt to bring the Balder back to life. When Aces found out about Loki's betrayal, their anger was boundless. They realized that patience. They dried up and decided to punish Loki, depriving him of the opportunity to do evil. Again, he tried to hide, but the gods tracked him down and grabbed him chained to a huge rock deep in a cave. Over his head they hung a huge snake whose venom dripped right on his face, causing unbearable pain. Loyal wife Loki Segyon stayed around. With him, keep the bowl in which he collected drops, poison to ease it a little. Suffering, but every time she departed to empty the cup of poison, got on Loki's face again, and from his screams shuddered all the worlds. So cunning and dangerous, Loki was punished for his greatest crime and death of the beautiful and beloved. Balder was a turning point. In the history of the gods, the death of Balder became not just personal tragedy for the gods and a turning point in the fate of all. The universe with his death collapsed, the last remnants. Order of wisdom and tranquility. Balance of the 9 worlds. And if before the balance between light and darkness seemed unshakable, then now dark forces dormant for centuries began to wake up rapidly. One of the first signs of the beginning of the end was great winter preceding Ragnarok, known in prophecies as Finnbolvinter. This winter was not like any of the previous ones with whom faced gods or immortals. She was a terrible natural disaster engulfed not only Midgard but all other worlds, even Asgard. Vemble winter lasted 3 long and painful years without giving way to spring. Neither summer nor even the shortest thaw. Every month her horror only intensified. The sun almost stopped shining closed. Heavy, dark clouds that day and night sent on the ground ferocious blizzards and prickly icy wind. Ice-forged sea lakes and river water turned into a hard as a stone ice surface. And the earth was completely covered with a thick layer of snow. Almost all the plants died and the forest turned in lifeless waste full of dry and dead trees. Animals deprived of food and shelters died out. Whole species and even the most persistent and largest predators began to die from hunger. People who used to lived peacefully and calmly now turned out in a desperate struggle for existence. They were forced to constantly look for leftover food, hunt each other, lead cruel wars for any shred, will eat again without sparing even your own friends and relatives. Mercy, compassion, and humanity gradually disappeared from their hearts, replaced by cruelty, malice, and madness. With every past year, Fimbulvinter, the hearts of the people became more and more harsh. Kids stopped respecting parents. Parents refused to protect their children. Tribes and clans broke up into small groups, which are endless, fought among themselves. No one felt in safety among the gods. Asgard mounted anxiety and a grim apprehension. They clearly saw that this was the beginning of a great and terrible, the prophecies they have heard of since ancient times. One understood that started. Chaos can no longer be stopped, and the death of his beloved son was only the first step in a long chain of events leading to a Ragnarok. Finally came what the gods have feared for so long, what the ancient prophecy of Fimbulvintor warned about, ended, and now the world stood on the threshold of a great and last battle named in Scandinavian mythology Ragnarok. It was an epic battle of the forces of light and darkness, of chaos that would determine the fate of the universe. The beginning of the end marked the terrible signs. Earth shook, heaven split with thunder. The mountains crumbled in dust, and oceans came out of the shores, flooding the Midgard lands. The dark sun and the bloody red moon disappeared with sky, plunging worlds into total darkness. Stars began to fall, flaring up tails of fire and illuminating the final path of the gods and people going to the mortal battle. In the depths of the earth and ocean, in the same time, began to crumble ancient shackles. Great wolf Fenrir, chain dwarf Gleipnir, finally managed to tear it apart. With a terrifying roar, he broke free. The gap in his huge mouth so wide that the jaw touched the sky and the lower ground. The eyes of the wolf burned with the scarlet flame of hatred for the gods, who once cheated him and chained him at the same time. Deep in the depths of the sea, the great world serpent Jörmungand began. Rise from ocean depths, huge waves rose and crashed on the shores of Midgard, sweeping away everything. On its way, snakes grown so much that wrapped the whole earth. At last let his tail out of his mouth, rushing to the shores and spewing deadly poison and destroying cities and forests. At the same time, he was freed from his painful Okof, and Loki himself, God. Deception, exhausted and dried up by years of imprisonment, was full of unquenchable rage and desire to avenge the gods for humiliation. And his misery shattered, the earth shattered, and Loki, released and determined, went to Jotunheim to collect a huge army of giants and monstrous creatures, whom he will lead to the last battle against Loki. Aces also gathered a huge army, dead souls from the dark realm Hel, his daughter and goddess. Death gave him her pale warriors, and lifeless, ready to fight without fear and pity, under Banalosi stood all creatures whose hearts are full hatred of the gods and the order they established. But not only troops of Loki and giants moved to the last battle in the south, in the red-hot world of Muspelheim. Fire finally woke up and began his devastating journey of fiery giant Surtkeeper, flaming sword and ruler of fiery lands. Surt gathered a huge war of fire of Polinov, whose bodies shone and burned brighter than the sun under his heavy steps the earth melted and split, and the flame of the sword, high above his head, illuminated the gloomy heaven. Marks the final path of fire and destruction. Surt and his army came out of Muspelheim ready to destroy the remnants of the old world and end the reign of the Asgard gods by. The fire giant set fire to the earth, turning everything around into a blazing hell and leaving no living creature. On their way from the other side, the gods of Asgard and their allies were going to their last battle too. One wisest of the gods led his army of Ainarians, of valiant warriors who died in battles and lived in Volgile, waiting for this day. Tor, the god of thunder, put on his combat armor and prepared Mjolnir to fight with them. Were also other great aces, brave Torwise, Heimdall, noble Freyr, and all those who believe that the last battle will not just be the end of the world, but new beginning. Both armies gathered on the vast plain of Vigard where it was the greatest battle of all time. The ground beneath my feet cracked and shuddered, and the sky flashed fierce lightning, reflecting approaching battle, and that sounded the last call of the horns of the Gialorhorn, who held in his hands Heimdall, informing the worlds of the beginning of Ragnarok. Deafening, the sound spread across the universe, and armies rushed towards each other, colliding in mortal combat by one of the most epic fights during the last battles. Became a mortal battle between the god of thunder Thor and the world serpent Jormungand, famous also like the Midgard serpent. Their fates were connected with from the beginning of time. According to ancient prophecy, it was they who were destined to meet in a decisive battle on the battlefield during the Ragnarok. When the snakes rose from the ocean, the depths, and fell to dry land, the earth shuddered beneath it. Heavy body, and the air was filled with poisonous fumes emanating from the mouth of the monster. His gigantic body covered in coarse scales wriggled, crushing everything in his path. He was so huge. What neither gods have ever seen anything like this before. Thor, god of thunder and greatest protector of Asgard, knew for a long time what exactly to engage in battle with this ancient monster is not drones. He went out to meet the enemy, clutching his hand. Milliner ego, eyes burned with courage and determination, despite the fact that God was well aware of the inevitability of his death. For Torah's most important thing was to fulfill its purpose: destroy Hermangonda and protect the worlds until the last breath. When God and serpents finally meet on the battlefield, everything around frozen in tension, Jormungand raised his giant head, revealing a mouthful of sharp fangs, and released a stream deadly poison capable of killing even the gods. Natir confidently rushed to the enemy, high, raising his hammer and dispersing deadly couples, lightning strikes and thunder. Their fight was frantic and brutal. The earth was shaking under the feet of the Taurus, and the sky lit up with lightning flashes from the blows of his hammer. He applied mighty blows to the giant snake body, and each hit by Mjolnir shook the ground and split the scales of the Ermengonda, from which flowed hot blood mixed with poison. And the serpent did not give up. He tried to capture Thor with his defaults rings, and Crush's battle went on long and was full of incredible tension and rage. At last, Thor, putting all his power into the last blow, inflicted crushing hit by a Mjolnir right in the head. Snake Hammer smashed his skull. Monsters in Amongan collapsed to the ground, shuddering in. Suicide fire and its huge rings weakened and stopped riddling, but Victory Road cost Dora. And 2, God took 9 steps from body of the defeated enemy as felt as deadly snake venom has penetrated deep into his body, poisoning him from inside. Thor stopped. Staggered did. Last deep breath and collapsed to the ground, breathless. The great god of thunder died. Next to someone he managed to defeat only at the cost of own. Another important and tragic moment. The last battle was a duel between the supreme god alone and terrifying wolf Fenrir monstrous spawn. Loki, Destiny, Odina, and Fenrir were cramped, intertwined prophecies of the most ancient times. The supreme god of Asgard always knew that at the end of days, it is he who will meet a giant wolf in decisive and a deadly battle whose outcome was predetermined. When Ragnarok started and armies clashed alone in accompanied, his loyal warriors immediately headed towards Fenrir. The great wolf released from his shackles were full of indomitable rage and thirst for revenge to the gods who deceived him so much. Centuries his huge figure towered over battlefield, and open mouth seemed to be able to swallow the whole world. The battle between Alone and Fenrir began furiously, and furiously God, wisdom, and wars fought with great dignity, using all your power and the knowledge accumulated over many centuries. One struck its magical spear gunner weapon that always hit exactly in target, but Fenrir was strong and huge to be easily overcome. His skin could not be pierced. Even the strongest and most accurate blows and wounds that inflicted one only incited even more rage and of hate in the heart of a wolf. In the end, Fenrir managed to grab alone in their terrible jaws, and despite all resistance, supreme god giant wolf swallowed it whole. The riding god of Asgard died as well. Was prophesied by prophecies and worlds pulled together, feeling the death of the greatest and wisest of gods. However, the death of one did not go unpunished. On battlefield, Vidar attended, silent and mighty son of Odin, known for his incredible strength and courage. When the Vidar saw Father Death, his heart filled such rage as he had never experienced before. With fearlessness and determination, which no one expected, the Vidar rushed to the monstrous wolf. He had a special boot made from scraps of oak shoes that have ever been thrown away by people on earth. The boot was so sturdy that no weapon or creature could destroy it. Stepping this boot on Fenrir's lower jaw and grabbing the upper Vidar with his hands, put all his strength and rage tearing the jaws of the wolf. With inhuman effort, he broke the monster's jaws, and Fenrir collapsed to the ground, shuddering in death convulsions still. One iconic and tragic battle was the battle between Loki, god of trickery and deceit, and Heimdall, a wise and watchful keeper. Asgard, these two gods have always been irreconcilable rivals and enemies, because Heimdall had a sharp vision and hearing for a long time, saw Loki's true nature, and constantly suspected him in treachery and betrayal. Their clash was inevitable. When the battle reached its climax, Loki and Heimdall met in the midst of chaos, surrounded by endless battle. gods of giants and dead warriors between them immediately. A fierce battle began in which both were determined to destroy each other at all costs. Loki is agile and fast, used all his tricks trying to cheat and strike from under the Teshka. Hindel fought the clear head and calm rage, relying on his skill. Anticipate the movements of the enemy. The bout lasted long and exhausting. Finally, Loki managed to inflict a fatal wound on Heimdall, but also Nimdal himself in the last. The moment struck back, I hit Loki in the heart. Both gods collapsed, dead almost at the same time, and this tragic scene symbolized how far have the destruction and chaos engulfed worlds. Their mortal encounters showed that in this conflict will be winners only, mutual destruction. But even these tragedies were not the last in the great battle. Fire giants of Muspelheim, led by a terrible Surt, continued their relentless march through the land of 9 worlds. Surt, giant of and fire, the incarnation of the indomitable. The flame was armed with a sword shining brighter than the sun. His army of fire giants left behind only ashes and smoking ruins. Their advance was like an all-consuming fire, who spared no one and nothing when the fights between gods and monsters have reached their apogee. Surt high lifted up his flaming sword and struck it on the ground from his strike. The earth split and fire broke out of the cracks, covered all the world, spreading with incredible speed. Cities and castles of Asgard, Lizai, and Midgard, seas icy, Jotunheim plains, and underground forges, Svartalfheim, all ruthlessly devoured by flames. Surt did not stop until he incinerated the whole world, and eventually flames and the smoke rose so high that completely absorbed even stars and heaven. Midgard completely burned, covered with ashes. Asgard and other worlds collapsed in a fire that destroyed everything. The 9 worlds ceased to exist, and from the former order of the universe, only smoldering debris and endless emptiness remained. Thus the ancient prophecy of Ragnarok was fulfilled, and the worlds are back to starting point, immersed in the pristine chaos. But even in this complete destruction was hope, because an ancient prophecy promised that after the death of the old world, there will be a new era in which the universe can be born and start your own existence, cleansed of errors and suffering of the past. When the last lights went out, fires and ashes sank to covered water. Empty ocean gradually began to retreat, and a renewed earth rose from it. Fertile green fields once again covered the fox world, made noise with young foliage, and again lit up in the sky bright sun and clear stars. A new world purified by fire and water became free from the mistakes of the past. He was like a blank slate on which could rewrite the history of all living beings. The earth rose again from the deep sea, and on it again began to grow plants to bloom. Flowers and rivers flowed, crystal clear streams of those who survived the disaster. There were very few gods among. They turned out sons: Odina Vidar, god of revenge and power, and whale god justice and renewal, survived. Also sons of Thor, Imagdu and Madi, who inherited strength and valor. His great father, and also became guardians of Mjolnir, symbol of protection and justice. these surviving gods gathered at the place where used to stand Asgard and think about the future. They decided to restore peace, but without cruelty and wars which were full of the old world now. Wisdom of understanding should have replaced rivalry and enmity, except that God survived Ragnarok and two people, Bodice or Vitraseer, sheltered during the disaster. In the sacred forest, a place untouched by fire and water from this couple, people had to rehappen. Human race, lion or lion, Tressier, get out of your shelters, first set foot on new land, filled with hope and faith in a better future such. Thus began a new cycle. Life, gods and people survived after Ragnarok together, laid the foundations of a new era, the era of peace, justice, and prosperity began to sound again. Songs praising courage, wisdom, and love, but without previous mistakes and cruelty. The world was ready to start all over again, keeping the memory of the past, but with the firm intention not to repeat previous mistakes. Prophecies promised that this new world would better than before. He will become a place where light and darkness are good and evil finally find balance and life, flowing calmly and harmoniously. Gods and people will again learn to live in peace and harmony, to remember your mistakes and appreciate that. The second opportunity that fate gave them on this. Our lecture about Scandinavian mythology concludes. Thank you that went with me to an amazing journey into the world of ancient northern legends. If you liked, be sure to put likes, subscribe to the channel, and leave comments ahead of you waiting for more. Many interesting stories and lectures before new meetings.